Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode. In fact, the fourth episode to round out one full month of broadcasts for the Offlane. I'm Topical, joined with me, my co-host, Potom of the Moon. And we have a special guest today, a special guest of Dragon Drop. Dragon Drop, how you doing, man?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, actually, to have you here. I've heard a lot about you. Both of you have actually casted together quite a bit. Is that right?
I try to avoid as much as I can, but yeah.
That's probably where I hear about you so much. Is Potom's just complaining, going. But we actually have a pretty good show today. It looks like we have a short show with only 3 topics, but in fact, it's still an equal length show. We're going to be rounding out in about an hour. Our first topic: latest changes to the DPC by Valve for the 2018-2019 season, leading up to the International again next year. Roster changes in the ensuing chaos of end of the year as well. Of course, you're going to end up with a roster shuffle here and there, and I'd say this is kind of like spawning season for roster changes, I'd say. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, most definitely, I would say. It's the time where the teams really want to drop rosters they're not comfortable with, or players where they just realize it's not working out.
Yeah.
Especially with the changes we're about to talk about.
Well, yeah,
it's free land for everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty quick, and it'd be like ripping off like a Band-Aid. I think most teams are ready to just get some things over with. But our last topic of the day is going to be the Super Major that is underway shortly, if I'm not mistaken, right? And
it's underway right now.
It's underway right now.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing right now is the early precursors on Reddit, or people are saying this is finally a major that feels like a major, which is pretty cool. So that'll be our third topic to round it out for the day. But, of course, we want to be able to pick these guys' brains on our topic number 1, the changes in the DPC that Valve has just pushed out. Assuming that everybody's read it so far, we'll start with you, Dragon Drop. What is your initial feedback of what Valve's movements are right now?
Well, the first thing I thought was that for teams, it should be great, especially for the lower tier teams. Like, I made a blog post a while ago pointing out these kind of issues that are fixed now with this system, because previously, or this season, minus and majors, they had always the same teams. Like, because even the top teams, Liquid, VP, Secrets, Newbie, for a while, like, they grinded not just through majors, but also through minors, because, of course, you want to get all the points that you can possibly get and all the money that you can possibly get, and with the results that minors and majors look pretty much the same in terms of teams attending and in terms of talent, which is another issue that I can come forward to now. But yeah, so my gripe was that the tier 2 scene, like the teams that don't regularly make qualifiers or that don't get invited to these bigger events, they just had nowhere left to go, because with the pro circuit, it also kind of killed all these smaller tournaments that they would normally go to instead, like these $10,000 to $50,000 tournaments. And them not being part of the DPC means that there's little incentive for that. There's no space for that between the 300K super high prestige Valve sponsored kind of deals. So it was actually very hard for these lower tier teams to survive, and that's exactly the kind of issue that is being fixed, because if you're taking part in a major, you're not taking part in the minor.
Yeah.
Go through major qualifiers.
So essentially what you're saying is there's room for growth. What actually Potom and I had said throughout the DPC and the episodes that we've had so far is the big guys bully. They come into the minors, like, we'll just use VP as the example because they are the example. But VP comes in and they dominate every time. They were already guaranteed a month ago. They were already guaranteed to make it into the international with so many points that they had, that every major and minor that they ended up showing up to at that point, they kept winning those. And what that ended up doing is that just stagnated the top 8. Like, nobody was able to gather up points and just got really stale towards that. So I think this is a really good step in the right direction by Valve. And it's kind of even doubly effective in the sense that it's going to foster growth of what this show is all about, which is like the tier 2 and below stuff. Potom, what are your thoughts on it?
So my original thoughts were that this might go either way. Like, first of all, we talked about how the tier 1 teams are choking the low scene, and you talked about it, in fact. However, I feel like, I mean, we actually, I'm pretty sure we called the pair of minors and majors as an idea like 2 weeks ago in I believe that was episode 2 when we talked with Wingblade. So it's a little bit weird to see such a drastic change, not last minute, but nobody expected this. Like usually how Valve did their announcements, we slowly adjust things and then we make some major changes, but this is like nice system you have there, and they're gonna throw it in the bin and make it all over again. Like it's not only that we have minors and majors now paired up and it's less events, it's also how they come to the DPC parts of the distribution with the rosters, because that's probably like the biggest change. If that is pretty much established there in the update.
So with the way that it's structured now, maybe Drag and Drop, you might be able to expand on this. Minors allow you to qualify for the major. Right, the winner of the minor qualifies for the major. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the way it works is there's like these blocks of tournaments. We start off with qualifiers for the major. You fill up a bunch of slots there because there are no direct invites whatsoever. So you'd have to fill up a bunch of slots with the normal qualifier systems and maybe some other ways. Who knows how much Valve will allow there. Like there would be perhaps opportunities for league play feeding into these tournaments as well. But that's the first part. Right? You start off with the major qualifiers. Afterwards, there are minor qualifiers. Anyone who's already qualified to the major cannot play in these minor qualifiers anymore. And then you have the minor first. The winner of that minor gets an extra slot towards the major.
Sure. So what that is kind of the point I was starting to get to is if you're a team that wins the minor and then qualifies for the major, and let's just say you win the major, you're able to feed off of two sources of DPC points of income. You know, you can get a kind of a leg up. Doesn't that seem a bit of a?
There's no DPC points for the minors as well.
Yeah, there's no DPCs
not.
for the minors.
No.
So they strip the minors of the DPC points, meaning less teams will be even interested in playing those.
Okay.
I'm fairly sure
the minor or major will earn DPC points.
Where we both left
source.
Yeah, it was in a blog post. I'm seeing it right now.
Okay.
Seems like we were both left. Like Dallas was right.
Maybe it's just one of these things where you assume
like, there's no way they would give DPC points to minors, right?
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. So you're right, you can gather points through minors. Is that what you're saying?
I guess so, but the thing is, you can only really judge that and judge the impact of that if you actually know the point values that you get. Because it's even in this system, like winning a minor is the same, or like winning one major is the same as winning 5 minors. So if it's similarly less impactful, then I don't really see that having much of an impact versus the kind of points that the major actually end up giving you.
So just from our conversation so far, it feels like to me that the minor is almost like a safety net for some teams that they may not qualify directly. Let's say OG has a bad week and they don't qualify for the major. They go down into the minor, they qualify for the minor. It's like kind of like a safety net for some teams as well, at the same time as being a boost towards the lower tier of Dota as well. I think it's a net positive for both directions, and to the point of it does not allow the DPC points to stagnate towards the mid and later part of the season. It gives an opportunity for more of the underdogs to show and shine.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? And this season, you sometimes saw teams like Team Spirit, like a few other teams, actually make it through the qualifier somehow, find a way to a minor or a major. I mean, same thing when it comes to like the teams participating for the most part. But then it just end up being cannon fodder, and the games are not enjoyable, right? So in the minor, the way that a minor should work. I mean, we've had some of these in this season as well. At least Starladder had like only BGJ Storm as a top 8 DPC team at the time. Everyone else was like below that, including like Navi, EG, and there was some really good Dotas there to be found as well. You don't necessarily need all the super high level teams. You just need to have teams that don't stump each other, essentially. And that's my hope with this system, that we're gonna have great tournaments in the minors, on a bit of a lower level compared to the majors, of course, but still super enjoyable to watch, and also most importantly, as you said, for these tier 2 teams to show what they can do, and also for the players to just get the LAN experience, to compete on that highest level, which is so different from just playing online all the time.
It is.
And
So
that allows them to
my
just-
question towards this
Yeah.
would be, or like more like two questions, is will we see like more regional minors? We talked about that in an earlier episode where we were aiming at like, hey, maybe you do minors that are clearly targeted towards one region. With the restrictions Valve is putting in place for the minors and majors with the entire rules, it seems fairly unlikely, but that's kind of what we wanted. It feels like the minors could still be like a playing ground for the big teams if they want to, if they do not manage to get through the qualifiers. So it's a bit fishy. Like, what do you do if like a team wants to try out some stuff? They might as well just attend like a minor with even a different roster or whatnot, just use it as a playing ground.
I'm not sure if teams think that way. Like expectation is that the really good teams will make it to the major in first go, right? And that the minus then just fills up. And sure, it can be that, as Topical said, like a good team has a bad week, you lose the qualifiers through some other freak reasons. Maybe someone else just steps up and goes into the majors in the first run. I mean, we've seen a lot of these underdog stories before as well. And we might end up with a team that's clearly better than anyone else if they get back into form. But I don't think that will be the default. And I don't think that there's necessarily that kind of a skill gap on this level of play.
You mean into the minors?
Into the minors.
Yeah, I agree. Well, if a team has a bad week and ends up down into the minors, I mean, we even using OG at this point might be competitive to some of the minor teams. But say worst comes to worst and VP ends up down there, then you get the discrepancy. But those are like one-offs. So I think it does structure the competition and foster and kind of coddle that competition to a degree that I think is appropriate. But I think to move ahead with some of this, I think it's a net positive when it comes to the competitive level of Dota that Valve is fostering. And from my perspective, I think they're doing quite well with it. But there was obviously more changes that they had included into that little headline that Valve pushed out. It wasn't just changes to the DPC and how the scoring system is going to be. They've also made a rule that teams that are financially interlinked cannot compete against one another in the same tournaments.
That's the big one. That's one of the most controversial ones. It's more like the biggest precaution you've seen Valve do in a couple of years. Usually Valve kind of was more reactionary, be it like cheating incidents and whatnot, but this is aimed at preventing any big organization or any basically any big player to just acquire team after team after team and potentially have conflict of interest. So we drafted up a couple of these examples. Like the most common one would be, I would say, VG with the multiple teams under the roster, be it VG, VGJ, or both VGJ and VG Potential. But there's also some non-Chinese examples looking at EG and Alliance who share the same owner, that is. So if we take a look at them,
I guess the biggest example would be VP and Navi as well, outside of China. Which is maybe not even as commonly known as the EG and Alliance thing.
Oh, actually, I didn't know. Is VP and Navi?
They're owned by the same company. That's
really
that. What's it called?
I don't know the name of the organization.
Called, it's the same organization. It's also involved in Epicenter, I do believe, and Cyberport.
That's even multiple.
Spots, essentially, right?
That's even multiple points of conflict, I would say.
Yeah.
Like if you have like a tournament organizer actually having a hand or stakes in a professional team on the scale of like VP and Navi, more VP than Navi that is, then that might influence it not only for DPC event but also for like other events as well. And I feel like only going back to the DPC events, the ruling that Valve made, it's not cut clear. It still has a little bit of speculation on there. They said financial or players that have financial ties to other teams. That's a fairly loose term. That's not what we know from Valve. Usually they go with like clear statements that don't have that much room to maybe sneak around.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. So there were even players at some point. PPD comes to mind. There's players that have had or possibly still have ownership. I know PPD has yielded his ownership in the organization of EG at one point being the CEO. But I think it's the right call from Valve. It does hurt the big guys in the sense, if you just look at PPD as an example, he's a budding entrepreneur. If he wants to own one team or another, then so be it. He wants to play Counter-Strike, but now you can't wear both of those hats, or not play Counter-Strike, play Dota. But he can't wear both of those hats at the same time now. And it heads off problems that were coming to pass. There were some examples, IG, for example, it was a point of contest. It didn't end up developing this way, but with the IG at the Changsha Major, what was it? It was down here. They played in the group standings of Group A between IG and IG Vitality. Now, if IG had won their series against their sister team 2-0, they had the chance to move up ahead in the at least in the group standings bracket, and it could have implications further on down. But with the way they split it 1-1, I think is fortunate, because if one of those teams, one way or the other, end up taking the series 2-0, it starts to raise concerns. I'm sure somebody on Reddit would have sparked up and said something about it.
It's always Reddit, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, not implicating anything that these teams will do that, but it is just the simple possibility of these kind of like exchanging favor, like, hey, we can't qualify for tier anymore, we're not eligible, so sister team might have an improvement of that. That might have ended up completely changed like the group stage, and that could be a big factor, especially if you have like the killer best of ones in the bottom half. Looking at that example of the playoffs, both IG Vitality and IG got eliminated in the best of one against Newbie and LGD respectively. So it's kind of weird that we see teams with the same name. As much as I kind of like it, but when they play in the same kind of tournament, it raises questions.
Like even if there's nothing actually going on, like we don't know that they actually make these kind of deals between each other.
Right.
It's just the appearance of that there might be something going on, because hey, money links them together in one way or another, and there's no way anyone can make that look good, and that alone is shining a bad light on the Dota scene and esports in general. So
I agree.
Something to be avoided.
Yeah, and it saves Valve a lot of work and a lot of headache in the long run, because if they didn't do it now, it's going to happen in the future.
Yeah,
guaranteed. It at some point or not, it will happen. And even if it is not clear cut and there's not a smoking gun, somebody is going to pipe up and say, hey, there's a possibility this could be happening, and then it's going to create speculation, and then you lose trust in the system. Valve is basically battening down the hatch and making sure it's a clean ship before it even sets sail. So it's a very smart move, but it has a lot of implications. Like, what are your guys' thoughts for organizations that have multiple teams? Right now, their hands are a little tied. Do they consolidate? Do they try and wrap their teams into one big team? They just pump more money into it, or do they try and separate their aspects and keep one T1 level team, and the T2 team just kind of never knocks on the door?
So I think one of the biggest problems with like combining those teams is that you technically can't do that. Like, we have 5 players on a Dota team. You can have extra players. Not even all tournaments do that kind of thing. And with the way that the DPC works, you can't just say, hey, these are 9 players and we swap them in like we see in like some other esports. Overwatch is a good example for example. That just doesn't work. You have that minus 20% every time you move somebody from a roster on your DPC points. That's a huge blow to like, that can cost you an invite or whatnot to TI if you manage to get enough points. So we're not going to see like the merging of teams. I think we are heading into the direction of more junior teams, like VG Potential. That's like, I would say, the best example. So VG kind of did it in the past, and same goes to IG. That they have B and C rosters, or even D, E, and F. Chinese region, they have a lot of teams.
Oh yeah.
where they just build up prominent players that show promise. They give them the support they need. Talk about like how China handles the scene all you want, but they have at least an okay support for upcoming players, which is not that prominent in the Western scene. So the Western scene more relies on like making random stacks, and maybe you get picked up by an organization at one point, or get dropped.
Right.
VG is kind of the best example where they built up a junior team and they let players virtually rise within the organization to the better teams if they show promise.
And what are your thoughts on a Drag and Drop?
That's I don't have that same perspective that like the team owners would have, so it's kind of hard for me to hop into that. But I would imagine the end result would be that it might just be that they split up the teams because, as Bottom said, like putting them together somehow and mixing and matching, it's way too awkward in a team-based game.
I
So
almost
just
Go
split them
ahead.
up and then maybe have some backroom deals even between them and similar people or that know each other, just running things together. I cannot imagine them being entirely separate, or at the very least, not in a way that we can confirm for 100%.
Yeah, I almost see that as it stands now, with the penalty to teams taking a 20% hit in their DPC points if they make any kind of roster swaps in the season, that seems heavy-handed to me. Something about it doesn't feel right. So much to the aspect of I'm going to call it now and say that in the future there is going to be structure, whether it's Valve led or not, but there will be a Valve sanctioned tier 2. You know, Valve deals with the international. This is tier 1. This is the best of the best. If there's a tier 2 and these teams and organizations have tier 2 level teams, they can treat it like they do here in the United States with baseball teams. There's teams like, for example, the Cleveland Indians have the Indianapolis Indians as their farm team. They have tier 2 teams that they can scout and they do all their homework on. They have the eyeball on these players, but they are in their own biosphere and they perform as best as they can because they know they can get out of that biosphere and go into tier 1 if they may. But it's just that there's no real structure right now for tier 2 and below Dota.
Yeah,
Even for Counter-Strike.
It all comes down to like connections for like the T2 players. You can't prove yourself on a big setting to an organization. You have to first assemble your stack, then you have to actually perform well, and then you might get picked up. And with this kind of restriction, you're looking at even more or even less teams getting picked up. It's before that it was kind of good that VG had like multiple teams because there's not that many organizations in the scene. And suddenly you tell your organizations you can have one Dota team. If you want a second one, good luck to you. They will never compete in TI. So you have like a killer newcomer squad. You have to wait in. Do we want to pick that up over our existing squad and limit our potential at TI? I feel like it's a little bit of an oversight on their end because what precisely speaks against having two teams there is, yes, there might be like the shady stuff we all hope never happens, be it rigging a game or whatnot, or other potential things. But that also opens like the market for like player poaching and whatnot. I would say, like we could see that a lot in the future, especially since there's no hard roster lock anymore.
There are a lot of good points there. Like, trying to think of which one I'll start with. I want to start with like
take your time.
Like having this like dedicated T2 scene in a structured way. I don't really see Valve getting behind that. Like anything Valve does is like staying away from getting their hands dirty, quote unquote, as much as they possibly can. And a system like that would require some serious organization, some dedicated people to manage that all the freaking time. And I don't really see that. And yeah, at the same time, like if there are no organizations that pick up the slack and have like more money to give to focus on development of lower tier people, then where is that actually going to come from?
Right.
So because like yeah, the way it is right now is, as Potom said, you try and perform. Maybe if you get a really good stack together that starts winning things, you either find an organization that wants to enter Dota, or you get sponsors yourself, try and build up a new organization yourself. none of that is frequent. None of that is easy. Like, it's extremely hard to get into Dota as an organization or as a team in first place on the tier 1 level. It requires you to win a lot.
Yeah.
Essentially, like a lot of the team owners that I know from that have dealings in other esports say, no, Dota is just not viable. It costs way too much to maintain the players versus what you get out of it. So that's certainly a part of that too. And so I don't really see tier 2 teams or like organizations even putting money in tier 2 in the first place under either system.
Yeah, there's a guy in chat named a guy or gal, sorry, writing Deja mentions Deja is there enough money for the structural development and support for lower tier players for that kind of system in Dota?
There's money in Dota?
And to kind of align that with you, Drag and Drop, is Valve likes to keep their hands clean of that. They're kind of a focused fire kind of company. You know, they focus on the international, they organize the tournament behind that. But actually what we do here at Nerd Street is organize tournaments and tournaments, brackets, schedules, and everything else. So there is a market for this. I think if someone were to package a tier 2 environment that could allow for competition for a lot of these organizations to keep what rosters they have, and if there's enough money in that industry that it could still be viable for them to hold those players and managers and coaches and everything else, then I think there'd be a lot of demand for that.
I can see that. I feel like this kind of structure would allow you to like more attach yourself to teams, because with all the changing you have, there's so many roster swaps. Fans follow players these days, not teams. And with all the reworks we see, we might see like the big names, be it Alliance or like, I'm not gonna make any Na'Vi jokes, don't worry. But having like the big names you all follow for like years and years on end, you might actually become a fan of like more the decisions as well as the rosters they pick up, and actually like putting faith in those rosters. And you're right. I think the structure allows that way more than usual, than what we've seen so far. But it's still it's so sketchy. Nobody knows right now. And as far as we know, Valve might change that next year again. Like, hey, we're gonna go back to the old system.
Yeah.
I think they will.
Yeah, I mean, with Valve, Valve's thing is set up something and then iterate on it, improve on it, or just if it doesn't work at all, just toss it out, start from scratch. Thing is, 1 year in esports is going by rapidly, and
roughly 5, yeah.
Yeah, which is hard enough for like outside money to come in, like and to understand, for organizations to actually have time to develop rosters, to do their brand building, right? And
it's just easier to drop a roster instead of like trying to improve a roster. Might as well, all right, these 5 players didn't work. Instead of like training them and building up and give them confidence, we're gonna take 5 others that are just better.
Yeah, because there's no destination in mind. If you do any long-term investment, and then the season entirely changes, the game changes on a very frequent basis as well, with patches and whatnot. One team that's good in one patch can just fail to adjust to the next 2 weeks. Right. So all of this uncertainty is, I would imagine that to be a very big downer for anyone who's wants to just pour money into brand building, organization, roster building.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as to how the next season develops. I think you'll have by midway through the season, even like a third of the way through the season, I think that's going to be the point of rosters are soft locked, because they can't afford to swap out players with their 20% penalty on its DC points. There's no hard point to it, but I think there's going to be a soft lock rather than a hard lock. And
there's a lot of math involved, and nobody likes math. So it's at one point the team will say, all right, we take our chances. There might even some strategic reasons like, hey, maybe the guys above us make a roster change and we get higher up in the rankings. You can always bet on that. It can always happen. But like we've seen more crazy roster changes, especially in the last few weeks. So I'm pretty sure that covers like the team aspect for quite a lot. But there's something I'm fairly sure me and Dragon Drop are pretty passionate about. So with the recent, we talk about the DPC changes a lot and how this affects, especially how the minors and majors are reworked. Let's talk about casting. Because
let's talk about it.
Let's talk about casting.
Why
are you in here?
Let's talk about our feelings.
Get out here, mister. I shoot enemies with and run at them every 20 seconds with no variety.
I'm sniper?
Go cast.
Are you calling me a sniper?
No, I don't know. Is it a sniper if you miss all the time? But yeah.
That
That's
would
what
be
you aim for, right?
that would be uphill. Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about the casting. We're all three pretty versed in it. Topical Dammit himself a little bit into Dota. So we had that uproar, and we had a lot of opinions over the last 8 to 12 hours. The news is out for quite some time now with the DPC. Quite some time in esports. That's basically 24 hours. So we're down from 22 tournaments to 10 tournaments in the DPC. There will be more qualifiers as there's no direct invites, which makes it definitely easy to build like a storyline around casting, or like how this team really made it there. Like you can really follow a team and then like get hyped up on it and actually follow through. Like you can go from the open qualifiers to the finals, and you can really follow and hype up a team, which kind of benefits from the brand building aspect we talked about. So there's no certainty, absolutely zero, what is going to happen with T2 casting. Right now, the events get cut to 50%, or less than 50%, that is, from 22 to 10. There's also no big announcement or speculations yet on any smaller tournaments that might benefit the T2 scene. And we kind of seen like all the big T1 talent in like every tournament. Not saying we're sick of it, but some variation is like desperately needed, most people agree. But
I'm actually... Sorry to interject here. I'm actually really excited to see what happens with the amateur scene, because on the storefront of that, it looks like, oh, there's fewer tournaments. It's not good. There's not as much business going around. But from my experience, what that ends up doing is, so what? Valve isn't doing it. Someone's going to do it because the demand is still there. You and I and Drag and Drop want it just as bad. Even it's gone, it doesn't matter. The demand is still there. The public still want that. So what you're going to see is a lot of private investment coming in, whether that's local tournaments in your local cities or regional tournaments, or what we're doing at Nerd Street is having a touring tournament that goes from Chicago, Philadelphia, and ends in Washington, D.C. Like that kind of growth, I think, is going to be stimulated by that.
That is the biggest question mark, isn't it? I mean, whether third-party tournaments will make a resurgence, because like in this season, everyone wanted to be a minor or major because of the prestige added to that, because it's connected to the biggest esports tournament of the year, prize pool-wise. That's not going to be possible anymore with just 10 events. And there's going to be some big gaps between these events too, where there's more space for these third-party tournaments. So it's certainly possible. And my hope is that there will be plenty to fill the gaps and pick up the slack, which would then basically also, of course, need casters to cast the qualifiers and the events and whatnot, which would basically fill it back up to a similar kind of level that we had in this season, which arguably, in some phases, was almost too much. And a tournament every week is crazy in its own right? But I just don't know if that's going to be the case without any positive incentive. Like right now, all we have for these tournaments is like their own business and whatever they can do to interest sponsors to fund it. And as you said, like coming in from the local side. But when it comes to Valve and the DPC and everything, it's only a negative incentive. Negative incentive when it comes to just, all right, you don't necessarily have to have a ticket and have everyone else be able to cast your game on a different stream. You can have invites still on these third-party tournaments if you want to just draw viewers. And I'm not sure if that's going to be enough. Like at the same time, we know that there's at least going to be some. Like ESL Hamburg was scheduled before that and doesn't fit the schedule, and they also tweeted about that not being part of the DPC. So yeah, opinions definitely differ. My hope is that you're right, Topical, that there is going to be a boom in that sector, which would make everything right and everything handy dandy.
Bring balance to the force.
Right
It's up to us to bring balance to the force. It's going to be on us. But what are your? Well, sorry to interject on you, on Jonas, but you can go ahead with what you were saying.
Yeah, it's as Dragdop mentioned. I think I read that in a blog from Skim Gaming. Talking about that ESL, you mentioned as well, Dragdop. They're not suddenly just gonna drop all their tournaments. It's not like, oh, DPC doesn't work. Well, we're out of here. We're going to a different esport. That's not going to happen. I think there's some really big adjustments to it. Like the biggest plus for this new structure is they have the non-DPC events have the privilege of inviting teams directly. That means you can go for a Na'Vi, Alliance, whoever you want, and you have like a good viewing base, like people that get behind teams really, like the crowd favorites. That is a good and a bad thing. So the good thing about it is I would say that's viewing numbers, whatnot. The bad thing might be, I don't know, do we precisely want that teams get more judged on their brand instead of like their playing style?
I think, I mean, it's actually better than it used to be, because one of the big problems with invites in this season was that the whole idea of giving teams based on brand a cheap shot at money and DPC points. And if these events don't have DPC points anymore, then that argumentation kind of falls a little bit flat. Like, it's not going to be as much of a. I mean, no one's going to care as much about a team winning or like getting a bit of money there at ESL if it doesn't have that impact on a DPC. So consequently, you shouldn't care as much about teams being invited that aren't as competitive as some others.
So how do you think, Dragdorp, how will this tackle down to like the cast league level? What can we expect from these TOs? Because we know there might be like there's no money from Valve involved. There's still an investment they made, or most TOs will make. How do they fill like this void that is left where they get stripped of like any big help, you could say. Like you no longer have the chance of minus majors with your prize being funded. So prize pool is a big amount of money you have to mostly chime in. What do you think will happen in that regard?
I can definitely see them not matching majors and minors in terms of prize pool. Like they're probably gonna get down a little bit low. But at the end of the day, I want to say prize pool is in terms of expenses is a bit of a lesser concern, because there's so many other things that go into putting up a live event. So I'm not sure exactly what kind of effect and what that has on the numbers. When it comes to casters, I mean, it's also really hard to tell. I wouldn't be too surprised to see it not have much of an impact at all and not make much of a difference, with the top tier talent still filling out their own schedule with these third-party events. And
yeah, the big guys are going to stay big, no matter
yeah,
what.
pretty much. And the likes of us still, like, I mean, this is the big glass ceiling, the topic that you and I are very passionate about, and being able to somehow break through to that. And I'm not sure that's going to change all that much, to be quite honest.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it ends up developing. Of course, this is like the first announcement that Valve has made about this DPC. There might be a couple little tweaks here and there, but it's not going to be anything the size of what was just dropped on us. But at this time, I think we got to kill the topic right now. We're actually falling behind schedule a little bit about the changes in the DPC, and I know that's the only time that we had for you today, Drag and Drop. But we appreciate you being here and offering us your time.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. And Jonas, what are your thoughts? Any closing thoughts? Anything last to say to Clemens?
I don't know. We talk on a pretty regular basis, so
of course you do.
I could go with a lot of inside jokes here, but they kind of burned out. So I know. Any shilling on your end, Clemens?
No, I'm good. Follow me on Twitter at DragonDropDota.
Yep.
It's all there in the corner as well. So.
Hey, at least your Twitter tag is right.
Is yours still? Oh, yours is still messed up. I put that memo in.
We fixed it in episode 3.
Oh man. Okay, we'll get back onto that one. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, follow Drag and Drop on Twitter at Drag and Drop Dota, and hopefully we'll have you back here soon enough. It was a pleasure having you. But we will move on to our second topic, which will be the Super Major. But how do you think? What are your thoughts so far, Jonas? We'll just kill some time right here real quick. What are your thoughts of our first 4 weeks into the Offlane now so far?
I don't know. It's like we have that weird up and down if it comes to topics. We started with the really small tournaments as well as ESL. We had an amazing interview with Wingblade. That's like probably one of my highlights because he brought so much insight to all of this. Like,
Yeah, that was cool.
I don't know. We had to like almost kill it in the middle because he had so many thoughts. We couldn't even stop talking to him, and he almost was exhausted because you kept asking dumb questions. I was keeping asking good questions.
Hey, hey.
Yeah, like this kind of stuff. This kind of stuff is exactly like what I feel like has to get more attention. Like we have to really give the perspective of others or like of people in the scene because well everybody can go on Reddit and then enjoy the newest whatever Reddit is on about these days, I guess. But really those inside stories is what you need to see and what you probably most people want to see. Like people that actually made it, they're better than us than in Dota, besides Rank Up.
Yeah.
Actually moving on. So
Well, I'm actually losing my train of thought as we speak. It's like disappearing on a whim. But that's right. And we're kind of like we're pacing ourselves decently with our interviews, but like we're having such good interviews, it's almost catching me off guard. I'm like, how do we do better next week? How do we do better next week? But again, ladies and gents, you guys can throw us tweets either directly at me or at Jonas. You guys can give us. Now your Twitter's good. Now it's right.
Wow, we fixed it.
Bottom of the moon.
Do we have the technology?
We have it. But yeah, you guys can shoot us any ideas or anybody else you'd like us to be able to interview as well. But we'll move over into the next topic of the day. That is, looks like roster changes.
Roster changes, indeed. So, roster changes. I would say we start with the biggie in the room. Let's talk about Alliance. Let's talk about some good tier 4 Dota.
Let's talk about...
I had to do that, sorry.
Let's talk about Loda getting...
Let's talk about the new generation, to title it correctly.
The new generation of Alliance.
So, big announcement was 12th of April. 12th of April 2013, that's when Loda joined Alliance. Like, he's been in the scene forever. Like, you think about Dota personalities, you think about, like, Loda. Like, Loda is in my top 3 of all time, instantly. Like, it comes to mind. Who's up for you there? Like, I know you lack some player knowledge.
Old school, I wouldn't say it's Loda for me. Probably Kuroki. But if you were to ask...
Yeah, right.
If you were to ask anybody, 999 out of 1,000 are going to choose one of the 10 players out of Alliance or Old Na'Vi out of the TI3 days.
Because that's the 2 top dogs, the 2 teams we see with the brand building mentioned earlier that really made an impact on the scene. They were there from the very beginning, right? Like, even under different names, but they played for ages. And the changes in Alliance right now is Loda is retiring.
Yep.
It was kind of not known or not public yet, but it was hinted all over the last year.
Well, retiring as a player, he will be the coach.
Retiring as a player, exactly. So Loda is moving to coach, and the addition is the addition to the roster is quite well. And if you ask me, that's a glorious move. That is a really glorious move because Quadro has ties to both Insania and Mickey from 2017, so they know each other quite well. This was well prepared in advance. They pretty much knew who they were aiming at. I'm really thinking with such an experienced coach and somebody who practically knows everything about Dota, if it's Loda, they have a really good shot at improving it, and that's exactly what we hinted at. That those teams are building up. They have faith in their in their roster, and they're actually building towards a roster that you see over and over and over, and they have confidence in them.
Yeah. So if anybody didn't catch our episode 2 or 3, we talked about the aging aspect of both Loda and Dendi. We focused on those 2 players and how neither of them were really at their prime anymore, and at what point do you shift and reorganize to get some of the new blood in there? And Alliance have made that first step, and they made that first step immediately after we suggested it. I'm not saying they're listening, but they might be listening.
Aren't they all listening? They always hear us. But yeah, a line change is probably one of the less surprising ones. We remember we talked about EG. That's another one we can talk about now.
Yeah.
So EG, OG, Optic, OG, Optic, something like that. There's too many teams with those initials. Please change it up. Too many G's in there, you could say. So, looking at the OG roster, June 4th, we had Anna and Thompson join the team after S4 and Fly left for EG the weeks before. With these additions, No-Tail moves to hard supports, and Mad will be moving to the offlane. So, No-Tail on hard support. No-Tail on hard support.
That's it.
That,
What?
okay.
What heroes does he get for a no-tail hard support? Because, I mean, what does he excel at that he could do a 5-roll hard?
I think
support?
No-Tail is. I think No-Tail is one of those players you can pretty much play any hero and get away with it on a hard support role.
I mean,
he's a flower, mate.
He's a flower. He is a flower. But like, I remember I met No-Tail at Columbus, at the Columbus. God, what was it? Speed Gaming ended up winning it. MLG Columbus, Dota, and there was like a COD tournament going on at the same time. But I shook No-Tail's hand. No-Tail has a firm handshake, and I was like, that's attributed to being able to play Meepo. Yeah, that's attributed to being able to play Meepo. Yeah.
I thought this is the argument for playing position 5 support, you know. But it will probably be the steel bolts.
Yeah,
I think with his signature, like we're gonna see his swing back to his signatures. Nagasarin comes to mind. It's more 4 position hero, can be pulled up on 5, especially with the current meta and the dual lanes. Same would be coming up with Visage as a flex pick, so I really like this addition. Did they change them around? Yeah, every game and Wind Ranger.
So
get me started.
Actually, this could actually get really interested if just theoretically, if you're playing against them. Do you ban one of No-Tail's 5-roll supports? Because usually when you're banning stuff, you are not concerned with whatever 5-roll support is. Whatever, let them play.
Yeah, like you get rid of maybe one, which is like maybe the Wisp, and that's most likely run as a 4 position as well.
Oh, that's right. No-Tail does have a dirty Wisp. Oh, yeah. I forgot.
I feel like we're gonna see at least Wisp and Visage being banned out against the G for quite some time. Like they gotta. It
could be interesting.
It's like you would ban Lone Druid and Nature's Prophet against the Old Alliance squad. That just you gotta just acknowledge No-Tail. Like if you don't, he might punish you just by picking his signature hero and roll you over with it. Like
look how beautiful he is. Look at him. He's gorgeous.
A flower.
He is a flower, man.
He's a flower.
He hasn't aged. Mate. He hasn't aged a day.
A little bit.
Maybe his eyebrows.
It's not as bad as
bushier.
You.
Yeah, dude, my hair got gray. But I think that could actually work out into their favor if they have such a strong 5-roll support now that has viability in transition heroes. So imagine 5-roll supports that transition into the late game. Of course, Wisp has obviously constant attractiveness. There's no taper on or taper off or anything. Wisp is just good all game. Silencer is one of those like 5 rolls, could be played 5-roll, but also scales very, very well into the late game.
Yeah, and we've seen getting Silencer picked up quite a lot with like the changes. You want support heroes that harass out extremely well. Yeah. Like support heroes that can stand up to like a Luna dual lane. That's why we see so much like Underlord +1 or Wind Ranger is the absolute best example on this. Yep. You put an Orb of Venom on Wind Ranger, you have the perfect support. He does damage, he can trade with whoever he wants, as long as it's not Shakira or Warlock or Bane. I feel like this shift is good because it gives a lot more action in the early game. It pulls the average game time a little bit down, while the Raxon have been buffed by Valve in the last patch, increasing it a little bit.
Yeah, buffed.
So yeah.
Slightly. So that's some player reorganization. But we mentioned earlier with Quickva coming over to Alliance, what does that do to Mad Lads?
Yeah, the Mad Lads. Oh, that's a harsh topic. So, Mad Lads, as announced about an hour ago before the show, officially disbanded. With Syndrome making a show. Stop acting that much.
It hurts.
It hurts because I casted them so much, and like they always looked so good. Then we had like they had to withdraw from that tournament. Like it didn't work out there, and like, it always felt like not commitment was the issue. It's more like they really have been dealt cards that were not were playing in their favor.
Yeah.
With the disband, it like as we know, Syndrome is going to cast a super major as an analyst panelist.
Like I kind of want to bring that up now that you bring that point up. Is how serious is a team like Mad Lads when you have it's a Cinder and Stack? It's not ever really a competitive team. It's
first of all,
loved team.
It is a Stack and Syndrome. We established that.
Is it?
Yeah, that's the joke. You gotta get the jokes. But I feel like looking how serious. I think they're really serious.
Really?
We've seen them playing, and there wasn't that much cloudy stuff you would expect. Like that was a legit Stack beside the name that could have actually made a difference. They also had good managing coaching as well, namely Bonkers on there. So they had a lot of structures, and I feel like Mad Lads could have been the team that Final Tribe is now.
All right, I'll let you put them on the same pedestal. But like I don't know. I feel like Syndrome has other commitments other to casting. Like that team is never really a real team, I think. If you're gonna button down and want to make a team that actually makes it through some qualifiers to make some serious cash, you don't have somebody that has to travel once a month at least to go to some event to cast, I'd say. I don't know how often he's actually casting, but that's about a typical commitment. Seems reasonable.
It seems reasonable, definitely. But as far as we know, all like Mad Lads did disband with corporate joining. But I know, like I heard something. Point, it is confirmed. It is confirmed. Mad Lads definitely disbanded, but there's some players left. And what happened with the players left is, as I heard from Mr. Bonkers himself, and I'm allowed to share this, they're currently establishing a new team with the rest of the players. So it's not gonna jump into curiosity. But he didn't give us anything, so we gotta speculate what's happening. That's
well, I mean, you could farm those.
If there were only some T1 players that have recently been kicked off a T1 team. Well, who would come to mind on your end?
That is all you. I do not know.
Oh man, I'm so up for the Misery Stack. It's gotta be Misery. Like, there's no chance Misery is not involved in there.
So a Misery Mad Lads pairing.
Yeah,
they need Misery need a +1 as well, don't they? They need to cast. Yeah, they lost Quickva.
We made speculations, more me than topical, because I know stuff he doesn't. But I'm saying, and you heard it here, Misery, Madara, Kezu, Sacha, and Kaiser. Kaiser with Echo International, just not disbanding, but they have been left scarred with players leaving and changing up. And I feel like because Kaiser and Sacha, they already know each other, and one of them will be like the addition there. It's gotta be them. Like, you heard it here first. I don't know if maybe there is an announcement or whatnot while we're doing this, but if not, you heard it here first.
So is it a team that's going to compete where? Because I mean, they're
in Europe.
I mean, well, I'm thinking more specifically than just Europe, but is it going to be a serious contender for the DPC next season, or are they going to come in, steal some points away, or they know?
I think they're going to go. I think they're going to go for the TA qualifiers. And this is what, if I can do a shameless plug here for Mr. Bonkers. So Bonkers told me he wanted to make a shout out saying, shout out to all the NA players coming over, assuring that the qualifiers are easy. So I'm fairly sure they're going to participate in all these qualifiers coming up. I can see them definitely pack a punch against teams. However, we haven't seen them play yet, and it's still speculation. It's like the speculation on the speculation. I think they're gonna establish themselves, and like they're one of these squads that can really grow. Like last time with Quagfire and whatnot, we have seen the issue. We have seen the issue that they have been dealt bad cards, and I feel like with these kind of editions, they're gonna have a little bit more luck.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll close that. We'll wrap that one up with a nice little bow on what your last. What were the 5 players on that stack? Is your presumption?
Kezu, Madara, Misery, Sacha, Kaiser.
All right. We'll see if it ends up developing. But we'll move into our last topic of the day. We're running short on time, so this one's going to be real tight. Just the super major.
So the super major?
Super duper, man.
Yeah. Short version. Lots of money, lots of DPC, lots of teams dropping out, lots of Na'Vi jokes. So, beside all of that, I mean, come on, Na'Vi had a really shabby performance. So, group stage started out perfectly. All the top DPC teams are going with the first places. LTD, Virtus Pro, Liquid, and Secret taking the first spot in the groups. Newbie, Mineski, Optic, and TNC taking the second, so they qualified directly to the upper bracket. Lower bracket was spread out, and we had some teams eliminated, namely Team Spirit lost to EG in the first round. EG's first kind of proof, you could say. And Infamous dropping out against VGJ Thunder. Storm, not Sun. God damn it! These names. Yeah, so the most important thing is Optic or VGJ. That's the 2 teams we're looking out for. So what VGJ needs to do is they have to place hard on Optic, and they actually going to play them down the road if both teams win the game. So we're gonna have that elimination match. Optic needs to get at least 3rd place. If they get 3rd place, they will surpass VGJ Thunder. However, if VGJ Thunder, which is not possible, gets 4th or higher, they earn the TI invite. So the most important thing is Optic needs rank 3 for the TI invite.
Ooh.
And I feel like that is a hard stretch. There's a lot of teams that have to run past there.
That's actually crazy. So, like, not only are you going to have, obviously, the grand finals to the super major, but there's also this little cherry of flavor between VGJ Thunder and Optic.
Like, take a look at the brackets. First of all, we have the NA Derby, Optic versus EG. I already like the memes already. Then, if Optic pulls through that, they have to place up against VGJ Storm, potentially, which they have to beat. After that, lose a Virtus Pro versus LGD, which will be the hardest match for them, and only then do they have their own little final for the final of the final. Meaning slot 5 or 6 in the quarterfinals.
I'm hoping, Purge is on this panel, right? For talent, right? For the major? If you don't know, I'll look it up because I'm asking because that can be overlooked by a decent amount of people. I mean, not Purge though. Purge will catch that, and Purge is he's gonna speak up and be like, dude, this game's gonna have some serious value to it.
I think it's going to be Black, to be honest. Black has so much insight in the scene. Yeah, he's Black is one of the most underrated people on the commentating desk. He's also German, shout out. But yeah, Black knows his stuff. Black, the traveling tier 1 player, he has been everywhere. He knows all the teams. So I think he's going to be the one that catches it out. And if the panel hasn't already catch it out, I'm sure it's so
on somebody's radar.
I want to see that drama where Optic beats everybody, and then we have that big final where VGJ Storm has to shiver in fear that they might not get through.
All right. Well, that's any closing thoughts, because we are out of time. It was a quick show again. It's always super fast when we do this.
Yeah, indeed. I think we covered everything. Super Major still running underway. I really hope there were more games done yet, but the show was too early.
Yeah, well, it's tough to find a commonality between East Coast time and German time, whatever you call that. But ladies and gents, thank you so much for watching. Definitely pay attention to what's going on with the Super Major, especially with what my co-host is saying between Optic and VGJ, as well as what his thoughts are on the upcoming, the Mad Lads team that's probably going to rebrand as another team, I would assume. But
we need a fancy name for them.
Yeah. I need a rhyme for lads. Bad lads.
What about like Team Salsa maybe? I don't know. Get something
I have no idea, but we're gonna end it on
Makes
that
a
note.
such joke.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, tune in next week. It'll be next Tuesday this time, same bat place, unless I